The Devil's Hand. Gang thought they owned every saloon from Texas to Colorado, leaving a trail of broken bodies and burning buildings in their wake. Tonight, in a dusty corner of Bitter Creek, they're about to learn the bloodiest lesson of their lives. John Mason isn't just another weathered face at the bar. For 15 years, he was the deadliest scout sniper in the Confederate Army, with 300 confirmed kills to his name. A man who could shoot the flame off a candle at 100 yards while riding at full gallop. This isn't just another tale of frontier justice. This is the story of how 5 of the most notorious outlaws in the West learned that some wolves wear sheep's clothing and some demons wear cowboy boots. In the next 5 minutes, they'll discover why Mason's victims never lived long enough to warn others about the quiet man with the storm-gray eyes and the lightning-fast draw. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the swinging doors of the Bitter Creek Saloon. Dust motes danced in the golden shafts of light as John Mason pushed through, his spurs making a gentle rhythm against the weathered floorboards. The saloon's usual chatter dimmed to a whisper as eyes tracked his movement, not because he demanded attention, but because he moved like a mountain lion among house cats. Mason's face told a story of hard years under harder suns. A thin scar, traced from his left temple to jaw, barely visible under 3 days' worth of silver-streaked stubble. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, and the colt on his hip showed more care than most men gave their wives. The weapon's pearl handle was yellowed with age and use, its bluing worn to a dull gray that matched its owner's eyes. Sarah Mackenzie, the saloon's owner, watched him cross the room with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent 20 years reading men's intentions in their walks. Mason didn't swagger like the cowboys, didn't slouch like the drunks, and didn't strut like the gunfighters. He moved like a man who knew exactly how much space he occupied in the world. No more, no less. "Whiskey," he said, voice as dry as the prairie wind. "Leave the bottle." Sarah placed both before him, noting how his eyes swept the room twice before. Settling on his drink, those eyes, she thought, had seen things that would haunt lesser men's nightmares. They were soldiers' eyes, shooters' eyes, the kind that measured distances in bullet trajectories. The regulars gave him space, instinctively sensing what Sarah saw. Here was a man who carried violence like others, carried pocket watches, hidden from view but always ready when needed. Even Big Jake, the local bruiser who usually tested every newcomer's mettle, found urgent business at the far end of the bar. Mason poured 2 fingers of whiskey, raised the glass, then paused. In the dirty mirror behind the bar, he watched 5 men enter the saloon. Their spurs rang too loud, their guns rode too low, and their eyes held the mean look of coyotes spotting a limping deer. Sarah's hand tightened on the bar rag. The Devil's Hand gang had arrived early this month for their protection money, and they weren't known for their patience or mercy. Mason took a slow sip of his whiskey, seemingly oblivious to the approaching danger. But Sarah noticed how his right hand now rested casually near his colt, and how his shoulders had loosened like a gunfighter preparing to draw. The smallest of the gang, a weasel-faced man with tobacco-stained teeth, bumped Mason's elbow deliberately. Whiskey sloshed over the glass rim onto the bar. The saloon went deadly quiet, the only sound the creaking of floorboards and the distant cry of a hawk riding the afternoon thermals. Mason didn't turn, didn't flinch, didn't even seem to breathe. He just sat there, still as a rattler before it strikes, watching the gang's reflection in the mirror with those storm-grey eyes that had seen too much death to be impressed by amateur attempts at intimidation. The moment stretched like hot taffy, everyone in the saloon holding their breath, waiting to see if blood would paint the floors before sunset. Sarah had seen this scene play out a dozen times before, always ending in broken bodies and weeping widows. But something was different this time. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Sarah Mackenzie had watched Bitter Creek die slowly over the past year, strangled by the Devil's Hand Gang's iron grip. Once proud ranchers now walked with their eyes down, shopkeepers handed over their earnings with trembling hands. And the sheriff spent more time in his bottle than keeping peace, but something in Mason's stillness made her wonder if change was coming, bloody as a summer storm. "Your whiskey made a mess of my friend's boots," the weasel-faced man drawled, his voice carrying the whine of a man who enjoyed others' fear. "Reckon you owe him an apology, and maybe some compensation." Through the mirror, Sarah watched Mason's eyes drift to the man's boots, bone-dry and dusty. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone, like summer lightning. "Your mother never taught you to lie better than that, boy?" The words fell soft as falling snow, but they cut through the saloon's tension like a razor. The weasel's face flushed red, hand dropping to his gun. His companions spread out, a movement so practiced. It spoke of countless similar confrontations. "Might want to reconsider your next move," Mason said, still not turning. "I counted your heartbeats when you walked in, all running fast, like scared rabbits. Man can't shoot straight when his heart's racing." Old Tom Brady, nursing his usual corner table, let out a low whistle. In 40 years of drinking at Bitter Creek, he'd never heard anyone talk to the Devil's Hand Gang like that. The gang's reputation was written in blood across 3 territories, 14 dead in Dodge City, a whole family burned alive in Laramie, the sheriff of Pine Ridge found with his eyes carved out. The gang's leader, a bear of a man they called Hawkins, shouldered through the saloon doors. Sarah's heart sank. Hawkins had dead eyes, the kind that enjoyed watching things suffer. His presence in Bitter Creek meant something bad was brewing. He usually only showed up when examples needed making. "Problem here, boys?" Hawkins asked, his voice surprisingly gentle for such a large man. That gentleness was a lie, like everything else about him. Sarah had seen him speak softly while breaking a man's fingers one by one. "This saddle tramp needs teaching some manners," the weasel said, gaining courage from his leader's presence. "Spilled whiskey on Buck's boots, then got smart about it." Hawkins studied Mason's back with the calculating look of a butcher sizing up meat. "Standing's considered polite when addressing your betters, friend." Mason took another sip of whiskey. "Then I'll stay seated." The saloon's collective intake of breath could have sucked the dust off the floor. Sarah's hand found the shotgun under the bar, though she knew it would only make things worse if she used it. The gang would burn the saloon down with everyone in it for such defiance. "Might be you don't know who we are," Hawkins said, that gentle voice gaining an edge. "Might be you need an education in local customs." "Might be," Mason agreed amiably. "Or might be I just don't care." Sarah saw something flicker in Hawkins' dead eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even a touch of fear. Men like him weren't used to such casual dismissal. Their power came from fear, and Mason wasn't playing his part in their usual script. "Town's been peaceful lately," Hawkins said, changing tactics. "Hate to see that change. Hate to see Miss Sarah's fine establishment damaged. Accidents happen when people don't show proper respect." Mason finally turned, his movements smooth as flowing water. His storm-grey eyes met Hawkins' dead ones, and something passed between them, some silent communication that made Hawkins take half a step back before he could catch himself. "Accidents do happen," Mason agreed softly. "Had a friend, once thought he was untouchable, rode with a gang, terrorized folks. One day he met someone who didn't scare. Next day, they buried what was left of him and his boys in a hole so deep even the worms couldn't find them. The threat hung in the air like gun smoke after a firefight." Sarah watched Hawkins' face closely, seeing the calculations running behind. Those dead eyes. The gang leader was smart enough to recognize this wasn't their usual target. This wasn't some cowboy they could bully or some shopkeeper they could intimidate. Hawkins gestured to his men, and they filed out of the saloon, their retreat measured to maintain dignity. But everyone watching knew something had shifted in Bitter Creek. For the first time since the Devil's Hand gang had claimed the territory, someone had stood against them and walked away, breathing. As the dust settled, old Tom Brady shuffled to the bar, his rheumatic legs moving slower than molasses. "Mister," he said to Mason, "either you're the bravest man I've seen in 40 years of drinking, or the biggest fool. Can't decide which." Mason's eyes stayed on the saloon doors. "Tell me about them." Sarah poured old Tom his usual whiskey, then leaned on the bar. "Started small 2 years back, just Hawkins and his brother, running protection rackets in Colorado. Then they joined up with Buck Tyler, the big one with the twin revolvers. Something changed after that. They got mean, real mean." Old Tom nodded, warming to the story. "Buck brought in the Whitaker brothers, Jake and Jesse, used to ride with Quantrill's raiders during the war. Story goes, they learned their trade cutting up civilians, developed a taste for it. Then came Charlie Webb, the little one with the tobacco teeth. He's their scout, finds soft targets, weak towns. Now they run everything from the Kansas border to the Rockies," Sarah continued. 23 dead in Dodge City last spring. Whole. Sheriff's Department in Liberty Creek found hanging from the water tower. Governor of Colorado put a $5,000 bounty on Hawkins' head. Nobody's tried to collect. Those who faced the Devil's Hand ended up feeding the vultures. Mason's finger traced the rim of his glass. "How many altogether?" "Core group's the 6 you saw," Tom replied. "But they've got allies in every town they control. Corrupt lawmen, frightened citizens willing to inform for them. They're like poison in the water. Can't see it, but it kills just the same." "They're coming back," Sarah said quietly. "Hawkins doesn't let challenges go unanswered. Last man who stood up to them, they nailed him to his own barn door, made his family watch. The saloon had emptied quickly after the gang's departure, leaving only the 3 of them. Through the windows, they could see townspeople hurrying home, locking doors, pulling shutters. Everyone knew what happened when the Devil's Hand felt disrespected. "Got a telegraph last week," Tom added, his voice dropping lower. "Friend in Denver. Says they're expanding. Made a deal with the Wilson gang out of Texas, joining forces. Wilson's bringing 30 hardened riders north. Once they arrive..." He left the implications hanging. Mason's expression hadn't changed, but something dangerous flickered in those grey eyes. "Tell me about Hawkins. What drives him?" Sarah shivered, remembering. "Power, control. He doesn't just want to own things. He wants to break them. Saw him once in the street, beating a man for being slow with protection money. Wasn't about the money. He was smiling, enjoying it, like a kid pulling wings off flies. His brother Samuel's worse," Tom contributed. "Quieter about it, but worse. Heard he caught a young boy stealing food in Laramie. By the time he finished, the boy's own mother couldn't recognize him." Mason stood, laying a silver dollar on the bar. "They have a base?" "Old McKinnon Ranch. 10 miles north," Sarah answered. "Previous owner accidentally fell down his own well. They've turned it into a fortress. Lookouts, ammunition stores, enough supplies to withstand a siege. Army captain came through last month. Said taking it would cost 50 lives minimum." "Appreciate the information," Mason said, moving toward the door. But Sarah caught his arm, surprising herself with her boldness. "Don't," she whispered. "Whatever you're thinking, don't. They'll kill you. Then they'll kill anyone who helped you. Then they'll burn Bitter Creek to the ground just to make sure the lesson sticks." Mason's eyes met hers, and she saw something, there that made her breath catch. Not anger or bloodlust or bravado, but a calm certainty that reminded her of mountain storms gathering on the horizon. "Some lessons," he said softly, "need teaching more than learning." He gently removed her hand from his arm and stepped into the fading afternoon light, leaving Sarah to wonder if she'd just witnessed the beginning of Bitter Creek's salvation or its destruction. Mason's boots left no sound on the packed earth of Bitter Creek's main street as he made his way to the livery stable. The town had gone quiet, windows shuttered, doors locked, a community holding its breath, waiting for violence to erupt. He'd seen it before in a dozen territories, 100 towns. Fear had a way of turning good people into ghosts. The Devil's Hand gang hadn't gone far. They waited at the livery, arranged in a loose semicircle around his dun mare. Hawkins stood center, that gentle smile still playing on his lips. Samuel, his brother, leaned against a post, methodically cleaning his nails with a knife that had seen uses far darker than personal grooming. "Hoped we might continue our discussion," Hawkins said pleasantly. "About manners, about respect." Mason stopped at the edge of their circle, just out of easy pistol range. A cold wind whipped dust devils between them, carrying the scent of approaching rain. "Nothing to discuss." "See, that's where you're wrong." Hawkins stepped forward, his size more apparent in the open street. "Everything in Bitter Creek runs through us. The shops, the saloons, the farms. Man wants to stay here. He needs to understand the natural order of things." Natural order. Mason's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Like how you did the McKinnons, the family in Laramie, the sheriff in Pine Ridge." Something dangerous flashed in Hawkins' eyes. "You've been asking questions. Didn't have to ask much. Terror leaves tracks, like a snake's belly in the sand." Charlie Webb, the weasel-faced scout, spat tobacco juice in Mason's direction. "Big words from a man about to feed." "The worms." Mason's eyes never left Hawkins. "Your dog's barking. Might want to leash him before he gets hurt." Webb's hand dropped to his gun, but Hawkins raised a finger, stopping him. "You carry yourself like a man who knows his trade. Could use someone with your experience. Pays good, benefits better than dying in the street." "Pass." Samuel pushed off from his post, the knife disappearing somewhere in his clothes. "Ain't giving you a choice, friend. Smart men take opportunities when offered. Dead men don't take anything at all." Thunder rolled in the distance as storm clouds gathered over the mountains. Mason glanced at the darkening sky, then back at the gang. "Last chance to ride away. Next move ends with blood." The Whitaker brothers laughed. Hard men's laughter that held no mirth. Buck Tyler's hands hovered near his twin colts, fingers twitching with anticipation. But Hawkins studied Mason with new intensity, seeing something in his stance that made him pause. "Who are you?" Hawkins asked softly. "Really? Just a man who's seen enough bullies?" "No." Hawkins shook his head. "You're something else. Way you stand, way you measure distances. Military, maybe?" "No." "Different training. Confederate scout?" Mason's silence was answer enough. Samuel's eyes widened slightly. "Heard stories during the war. Scout sniper so good they said he could shoot a man's buttons off at 300 yards. Never missed, never left traces. They called him Ghost," Hawkins finished. "The gray ghost of Virginia." A slow smile spread across his face. "Thought you died at Gettysburg." Many did. The gang's posture shifted subtly, hands closer to weapons, feet setting for quick movement. They'd come expecting to intimidate a drifter. Instead, they'd found a legend, one whose reputation for dealing death rivaled their own. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, spattering the dust between Mason and the Devil's Hand gang. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the scene in stark white. 6 killers facing one man who stood as calm as if he were waiting for dinner. "Way." "I see it," Hawkins said. "You've got 2 choices. Join us, put those skills to profitable use, or die here, feed the crows. No shame in smart business." Forgot choice 3. Mason's voice carried over another rumble of thunder, which is, "I kill you all and save a lot of good people future grief." The words hung in the rain-heavy air. Not a threat, not a boast, just a simple statement of fact that chilled harder than the storm wind. Webb's tobacco-stained grin faltered. The Whitaker brothers exchanged glances. Even Samuel's dead eyes showed a flicker of unease. But Hawkins laughed, a sound empty of humor. "One man? Against all of us? Those war stories must have addled your brain, Ghost." "Not stories," Mason replied. "Ask the 73 men I took in Virginia. The ones who lived long enough to ask questions, anyway." As if to punctuate his words, lightning flashed again, closer now. In that brief illumination, something changed in Mason's stance, a subtle shift that made every man facing him instinctively step back. It wasn't a gunfighter's aggressive posture or a brawler's tensed muscles. It was the loose, ready position of a man who had dealt death so often it had become as natural as breathing. "Last warning," Mason said quietly. "Ride out. Don't come back, or start dying here and now." Samuel's knife appeared in his hand, blade gleaming dully in the stormy light. "Enough talk. Time to—" The lightning crack drowned out the gunshot. Samuel's knife fell from suddenly lifeless fingers, a neat hole, drilled through his wrist. None of them had seen Mason draw. None of them had even seen his hand move. But there he stood, Colt leveled, smoke curling from the barrel despite the rain. "Jesus," Webb whispered. "Next one goes through bone," Mason said in that same quiet voice. "Choose." Hawkins's face had gone pale with fury. "You just signed every death warrant in Bitter Creek. Wilson's riders are coming. 30 hard men who'll burn this town to cinders, all because you couldn't kneel like a smart man. 30 more graves to dig." Mason's gun hadn't moved. "Or one gang of cowards who ran when they met real resistance. Your choice, but choose fast." Triggers getting heavy. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Rain fell harder now, soaking everyone, but no one moved. Buck Tyler's hands twitched near his guns. Jake Whitaker's breathing came fast and shallow. Every man there had killed, had faced death before. But something in Mason's dead-steady aim and storm-gray eyes told them this was different. "Mount up," Hawkins finally spat. "This ain't finished." They backed away slowly, keeping Mason in sight, then swung onto their horses. As they turned north toward their ranch, Hawkins reined in for a final word. 3 days, he called through the rain. "Wilson's men arrive in 3 days. Then we're coming back with enough guns to turn this town into kindling. Hope your pride keeps you warm while you watch everyone burn." Mason waited until they'd ridden out of sight before lowering his Colt. The storm was directly overhead now, thunder booming like artillery fire. Behind him, a door creaked open. Sarah stood in the saloon entrance, shotgun cradled in her arms, face pale but determined. "You've killed us all," she said softly. Mason checked his pistol, reloading the spent round with practiced ease. "No, ma'am. Just gave this town its first real chance at living." The storm raged through the night, but Mason worked methodically by lamplight in his rented room above the saloon. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he cleaned his weapons. The Colt that had wounded Samuel, a Winchester rifle worn, smooth with use, and a peculiar long-barreled Whitworth rifle that spoke of his Confederate past. Sarah watched from the doorway, her shotgun still close at hand. "Town council's meeting. They're scared, talking about asking you to leave, thinking maybe the gang will show mercy." "Won't." Mason didn't look up from his work. "Men like that don't know mercy, only weakness and opportunity." "Like you'd know." There was an edge to her voice, fear making it sharp. Mason's hands stilled on the Whitworth. For a moment, he seemed to be seeing something far away, something written in blood and gun smoke. "Gettysburg, 3rd day. I was positioned on Seminary Ridge, had orders to target Union officers. Could see them through my scope, young men, most of them, some barely old enough to shave." He resumed cleaning, his movements precise. "Took 17 shots that morning, 17 men who never saw sunset. Clean kills, all of them. Professional, but I saw their faces through the scope, saw the moment they realized death had found them. Same look Hawkins had today when he understood what he was facing. You're enjoying this, Sarah accused. The chance to kill again. No, ma'am. Mason's voice was soft but firm. Never enjoyed it. But some men are rabid dogs. Putting them down isn't pleasure. It's necessity. A commotion from downstairs interrupted them. Heavy boots on the stairs, multiple men. Mason's Colt seemed to materialize in his hand, but Sarah waved him down. It's just Tom Brady and... She paused, surprised. Sheriff Mills. The sheriff entered first, still wearing his badge, though his eyes showed he'd rather be nursing a bottle. Tom Brady followed, along with 3 other men Sarah recognized as ranch hands from the outlying farms. "Come to run me out of town, Sheriff?" Mason asked mildly. Mills removed his hat, twisted it in nervous hands. "No, sir." "Come to... Well, Tom here says you're the ghost, the one they talked about during the war. Says you might be able to help." "Help?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "He's brought hell down on us all. 30 riders coming to burn everything we've built." 36, one of the ranch hands corrected. "Rode out to scout after the gang left. Saw dust on the horizon. Wilson's men are coming early. They'll be here by tomorrow night." Mason nodded as if this confirmed something. "Better. Less time for them to plan. More likely to make mistakes." "Mistakes?" Mills's voice cracked. "They outnumber us 6 to 1. I've got 2 deputies, both green. The town has maybe 10 men who can shoot straight. Rest are shopkeepers and farmers." "Numbers don't win fights," Mason said, starting to disassemble the Whitworth. "Position does. Preparation does. Will does." "That how you did it?" Tom asked. "During the war? They said you killed more officers than any other sniper. Said you could hide in plain sight, make shots that seemed impossible." Mason's hands moved over the rifle with familiar intimacy. Wasn't impossible, was patience, preparation, understanding that every man, no matter how strong or well-armed, has weaknesses, points where they're vulnerable, moments when they forget. To be afraid. He looked up, meeting each man's eyes in turn. "Wilson's riders are coming to kill us all. That's their strength, their willingness to do whatever it takes, but it's also their weakness. Men that brutal get careless, overconfident. They'll expect fear, expect surrender, won't expect a town that fights back." Sarah watched something change in the room. The men stood straighter, their fear giving way to something else, something harder. Mason's calm certainty seemed to fill the space, pushing back the terror that had gripped Bitter Creek for so long. "Teach us," Mills said suddenly. "Show us how to fight them." Mason laid the cleaned rifle parts on his bed. "Got 3 things working in our favor. First, I know their type. They'll come in hard and fast, looking to break us quick. Second, I know this kind of ground. Spent years learning how terrain can kill as surely as any bullet. Third," he allowed himself a small smile, "they don't know what they're riding into. Think they're facing one man and a town of cowards." Outside, the storm began to fade, thunder growing distant. But in that room, with Mason laying out his plans, a different kind of storm was gathering, one that would break over Bitter Creek with the force of long-suppressed rage and newfound courage. Dawn broke over Bitter Creek with the promise of blood on the horizon. Mason stood on the saloon's roof, Whitworth rifle cradled in his arms, watching the first light paint the surrounding hills gold. Behind him, Sarah climbed the ladder, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You don't sleep much, do you?" she asked, offering him a cup. "Enough." His eyes never left the horizon. "Sleep's like anything else. Train yourself to take what you need, when you can get it. The men are ready. Been practicing quick draw since sunrise." She paused. "Tom Brady says you haven't told us everything about why you're really here." Mason took a slow sip of coffee. For a long moment, the only sound was the morning wind and distant crows. "Ever hear of a place called Shadow Creek, down in Kansas territory? Heard it burned last year. Some kind of accident." "No accident." Mason's voice turned hard as granite. "Town just like this one. Good people, hard-working. Had a woman there, Mary, was going to quit the trail, settle down. Then the Wilson gang rode in." Sarah's breath caught. "The same ones coming here?" Mason nodded. "Town tried to resist. Failed. Wilson made examples. Mary—" His grip tightened on the rifle. "They made me watch, said it'd teach me to respect their authority. When they finished, they burned everything, left me alive to spread the word about what happens to folks who don't kneel." "Jesus," Sarah whispered. "That's why you're here. You've been hunting them, tracking them, learning their patterns, waiting for the right moment." His eyes finally met hers. "Your town's not the target. I am. Been leaving signs, breadcrumbs. Knew they'd eventually come looking for the man who's been picking off their scouts and disrupting their operations." "You used us as bait?" Anger flared in her voice. "No, ma'am, gave you a chance. Same chance Shadow Creek never got." He turned back to scanning the horizon. "Wilson's men are strong against weak targets, but they've never faced organized resistance, never fought someone who knows their ways. That changes today." Below, the town was coming alive. Men moved with new purpose, carrying weapons, taking positions Mason had assigned. The fear that had gripped Bitter Creek was transforming into something else. Determination, born of desperation. "Found these in the general store's basement," Sarah said, laying out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "Owner said they're left from the war, thought they might help." Mason unwrapped the bundle. Inside lay a dozen glass bottles, rags, and a jug of coal oil. "Makeshift grenades," he nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. Fire's their weapon of choice. Let's see how they like the taste of it. Tom says you've got a plan. Something about the old silver mine? Wilson's men will come in 3 groups," Mason explained. "Their usual pattern. Main force straight down the street. Smaller groups trying to flank. Mine shaft runs under the east road. Few well-placed charges. We turn their own tactics against them." Sarah studied his face in the growing light. "You've done this before. Set traps. Used terrain against superior numbers. Antietam," he said quietly, "was trapped behind Union lines for 3 days. Turned every tree, every rock into a weapon. Took 12 of them before I made it back to our lines." His voice carried no pride, just the weight of hard-learned lessons. Movement on the street drew their attention. Sheriff Mills was organizing the townsmen, showing them how to create firing positions behind water troughs and wagon wheels. The change in him was striking, the uncertain drunk replaced by a man remembering his duty. "They're not soldiers," Sarah observed. "Don't need to be, just need to hold their ground. Buy time." Mason raised the Whitworth, checking its sight alignment. "I'll do the killing." The way he said it sent chills down Sarah's spine. Not a boast, not a threat, just the calm statement of a man who had turned death into an art form. "What if we fail?" she asked softly. Mason lowered the rifle. "Then we fail fighting, better than living on our knees." He turned to her fully. "Still time to leave. Take the South Road. Be clear before they arrive." Sarah thought of her saloon, of the life she'd built, of all the times she'd looked away while the Devil's Hand gang terrorized her neighbors. "No," she said firmly. "Sometimes you have to make a stand, even if it costs everything." A ghost of a smile touched Mason's lips. "Courage comes in different forms, ma'am. Some men show it with guns. Some women show it by staying when they could run." The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist. In a few hours, Wilson's riders would arrive, expecting to find a cowed town ready for slaughter. Instead, they'd find something else, a trap laid by a master hunter and a people who had finally found their spine. Mid-morning brought the Devil's Hand gang's message, dragged behind a horse into the center of town. The body was what remained of young Billy Carter, one of Sheriff Mills's deputies who'd been on patrol. They'd taken their time with him, made. Sure, he suffered enough to serve as a warning. Mason stood over the body, while Mills cut it free, his expression unchanging. But Sarah saw how his hand tightened on the Whitworth stock, saw the cold fury building behind those storm-grey eyes. "Found him 3 miles out," Tom Brady reported, voice shaking. They wrote something on his chest, carved it in. Mason knelt beside the body. The words were crude but clear. "Ghost and town burn tonight." "Bastards," Mills whispered, hands trembling as he covered Billy with his coat. He was just a kid, never even fired his gun in anger. "They're watching," Mason said quietly, scanning the distant ridgelines, "waiting to see how we react. Fear's their weapon, more effective than bullets if we let it be." A crowd was gathering, drawn by the commotion. Sarah saw the familiar terror creeping back into their eyes, threatening to undo all of Mason's work. One brutal message was all it might take to break their resolve. But Mason wasn't finished. He stood, facing the townspeople, his voice carrying clear and cold as mountain water. "This is what they do: murder the innocent, torture the weak, make examples to keep you afraid." His eyes swept the crowd. But they made a mistake. They showed their hand too early, proved what I've been telling you. There's no dealing with rabid dogs, no mercy to be found, only one solution. "They killed Billy," someone in the crowd protested. "Just rode up and took him. What chance do we have?" "Better than his," Mason replied harshly. "He died alone. We stand together." He pointed to the distant hills. "They're up there right now, watching, expecting this display to break us, expecting us to run or surrender or turn on each other. That's what they know, what they understand." He moved through the crowd, meeting eyes, his intensity drawing them in. "But they don't understand everything, don't know about the dynamite we've planted in the mine shaft, the firing positions we've prepared, the courage that fear can forge. When good people finally say, 'Enough,' Sarah watched the transformation in the crowd, saw fear warring with anger, desperation giving way to determination. Mason had done more than train them to fight. He'd taught them to channel their terror into something harder. "Get him inside," Mason ordered Mills, gesturing to Billy's body. "Give him the dignity they denied him. Rest of you, back to your positions. Time's running short." As the crowd dispersed, Sarah approached Mason. "You knew they'd do something like this. Expected worse," he admitted. "They're rattled, making mistakes. Should have taken more time with him, made it more brutal. Instead, they rushed. It means they're afraid of you, of what you've become. They're used to terrorizing sheep. Now the sheep have teeth." A rider appeared on the south road, kicking up dust as he raced toward town. One of the outlying ranches Mason had posted as sentries. He reined in hard, his horse lathered and blowing. "They're coming!" he shouted. Wilson's men joined up with the Devil's Hand. At least 40 riders, maybe more, moving fast. "Be here within the hour." Mason's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his stance. The hunter sensing his quarry approaching. "Get everyone in position," he ordered. "Remember what I taught you. Stay low, stay patient, wait for my signal." "What about the women, children?" Mills asked. "Already taken care of," Sarah answered. "Got them hidden in the old root cellars beneath the church. Mason showed us how to conceal the entrances." Mason checked his Colt, then unslung the Whitworth. "Take your positions. When it starts, don't think about who they are or what they've done. Think about Billy. Think about every person they've terrorized, every life they've destroyed. Let that steel your hand when the time comes." The sentry's warning spread through town like wildfire. Men moved to their assigned places, weapons ready. Women who'd chosen to stay distributed extra ammunition and bandages. Even the town's children had roles, prepared to run messages between fighting positions. Sarah watched it all with a mixture of pride and terror. Yesterday, these had been shopkeepers, farmers, ordinary folks trying to live quiet lives. Today, they were an army of sorts. Not professionals like the killers riding toward them, but something perhaps more dangerous. People who had finally found the courage to fight back. "One thing," she said to Mason as he prepared to take his position, "on the saloon roof, if we survive this, was any of it true? About Shadow Creek, about Mary?" Mason paused on the ladder. "All of it, every word." His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw past the deadly calm to the pain beneath. Difference is, this time I'm not watching. This time the fire burns them. The riders appeared like a dark tide on the horizon, dust rising behind them in a churning cloud. Through the Whitworth's scope, Mason counted them methodically. 43 men, heavily armed, moving in a formation that spoke of military experience. Wilson himself rode near the center, a giant of a man on a black stallion, flanked by Hawkins and his remaining gang members. "Remember," Mason's voice carried soft but clear through the town's tense silence. "Let the first group pass the mine entrance. Wait for my shot." Below, concealed behind makeshift barriers and inside buildings, the townspeople gripped their weapons. With white-knuckled determination, Sarah crouched behind her bar, shotgun ready, watching through a gap in the saloon's boarded windows. The riders split into 3 groups exactly as Mason had predicted. The main force, 30 strong, headed straight. Down the main street, 2 smaller groups peeled off, moving to flank the town from both sides. "Getting awful close," Mills whispered from his position. "Patience," Mason replied. Through his scope, he watched Wilson raise a hand, signaling his men to slow their approach. The gang leader's eyes scanned the seemingly deserted town, searching for signs of resistance. The first group reached the mine shaft entrance. Mason's finger tightened on the trigger. Not aiming at the riders, his target was the carefully placed dynamite charge, visible only to someone who knew exactly where to look. The Whitworth's report cracked like thunder in the morning stillness. A heartbeat later, the ground erupted. Horses screamed, men shouted in confusion as the road collapsed beneath them. 8 riders disappeared into the sudden chasm, others thrown clear by panicked mounts. "Now!" Mason's command triggered a coordinated response. Every window, every doorway, every prepared position erupted with gunfire. Rifles that had once hunted deer now sought human targets. The townspeople's aim wasn't professional, but at this range, it didn't need to be. Wilson's men, caught in the open, took heavy casualties in those first crucial seconds. Those still mounted wheeled their horses, trying to retreat, only to find their escape routes covered by Mason's carefully positioned shooters. "Keep firing," Mason ordered, the Whitworth speaking again and again. Each shot found a target, men. Falling from saddles, horses dropping, chaos spreading through the Outlaws' ranks. The flanking groups turned to aid their companions, but Mason had prepared for this too. Hidden townsmen released pre-positioned wagon loads of barrels, sending them crashing down the side streets. The heavy barrels, filled with coal oil, burst among the riders. A single shot from Tom Brady's rifle ignited the spilled fuel, turning the street into an inferno. Sarah watched in awe as Mason's trap unfolded. The professional killers, expecting to find easy prey, instead found themselves caught in a carefully orchestrated killing ground. Every escape route blocked, every advantage turned against them. Wilson's voice boomed over the chaos, trying to rally his men. "Push through, they're just farmers. Push!" The Whitworth spoke once more. Wilson's words ended in a gurgle as Mason's shot took him through the throat. The giant swayed in his saddle for a moment, then toppled heavily to the dust. Their leaders down, the cry spread through the defending townspeople, strengthening their resolve. More rifles joined the fight as those who'd hesitated found their courage. But hardened killers don't break easily. Hawkins seized command, shouting orders that brought some semblance of organization to the chaos. The remaining riders dismounted, using their horses as cover, returning fire with professional accuracy. "They're rallying!" Sarah called out, ducking, as bullets splintered her bar. "Good," Mason replied, and there was something in his voice that made her skin crawl. "Means they'll bunch up. Makes what comes next easier." He raised a hand, signaling to the church steeple where Tom Brady waited. The old man pulled a rope, and suddenly the morning air filled with the sound of rolling thunder. But this thunder came from beneath the street. Mason had spent the night laying charges in the town's old drainage tunnels. Now, as the surviving riders gathered behind their makeshift cover, those charges detonated in sequence. The street erupted again and again, sending men, horses, and debris flying. "Jesus," Mills breathed, watching the destruction. "You turned the whole town into a trap." "Not done yet," Mason replied, the Whitworth never stopping its deadly work. "This was just to make them angry, make them stupid. Real killing comes next." Hawkins proved himself a worthy successor to Wilson's command. Under heavy fire, he organized the surviving riders into defensive positions, using the craters from Mason's explosions as makeshift fortifications. His men's return fire was disciplined, professional, pinning down several of the townspeople's positions. "They're good," Sarah observed, feeding shells into her shotgun, "starting to work together again." "Course they are," Mason replied calmly, working the Whitworth's action. "Men like that don't break easy. That's why we let them think they're winning." Through the gun smoke and dust, Hawkins' voice carried clear and confident. "Push to the buildings. They've used their surprises. Now we show these farmers what real killers can do." His men responded, laying down covering fire while groups of 3 and 4 began advancing from crater to crater. It was a solid tactical move, one that would eventually bring them within storming distance of the defended buildings. "Should we fall back?" Mills asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. "No." Mason's eyes never left his scope. "Watch their left flank. Count to 30. Before Mills could question the instruction, a new sound cut through the gunfire. Horses, hooves on packed earth coming fast. The outlaws turned toward the noise, just as 24 riderless horses burst from a side street, driven by hidden townspeople. The panicked animals plunged through the raiders' positions, scattering their careful formations. "Now the right," Mason called. More horses appeared from the opposite direction, creating chaos in the outlaws' ranks. Men dove for cover, some caught beneath flying hooves, others forced to abandon their positions. "Clever bastard," Sarah breathed. "You kept the horses from the livery stable." "Amazing how much damage scared horses can do," Mason agreed. "More than bullets sometimes, but that's not the real trap." Hawkins must have sensed it too. "Fall back," he shouted. "It's another setup." "Fall back to—" The Whitworth cracked. Hawkins' hat flew off, a neat hole drilled through its crown. The gang leader dropped like a stone, unhurt but thoroughly rattled. Could have killed him, Sarah noted. Not yet. Need him scared first. Need them all scared. The riders began a fighting retreat, falling back toward the town's south end. They moved well even under pressure, maintaining fire teams to cover their withdrawal. But Sarah noticed something odd about their movement. "They're only falling back along the main street," she said. "Why not split up? Use the alleys?" Mason allowed himself a small smile. "Because they don't know which alleys are safe. Look at the ground." Sarah studied the street, and understanding dawned. The multiple explosions had left debris and craters everywhere, except for a clear path down the main street. The very path the outlaws were taking. "You're herding them," she whispered, "like cattle. Learned it hunting buffalo before the war. Animals naturally follow the path of least resistance. Men do too, if they're scared enough." The riders continued their withdrawal, taking cover behind water troughs and abandoned wagons. Their return fire was still deadly. 2 townsmen cried out as bullets found their marks. But they were moving exactly where Mason wanted them. "Get ready," he called to his hidden forces. "Remember the signal." The outlaws reached the south end of town, gathering behind a hastily formed barricade of wagons and crates. They numbered less than 20 now, but those 20 were the toughest, most experienced fighters. Men who'd survived ambush before, who knew how to handle surprise and superior numbers. Hawkins raised his head cautiously. "Hold here," he commanded. "We've got cover, good fields of fire. Let them come to us." Mason's soft chuckle carried across the battleground. Wrong choice. A single shot from the Whitworth struck a seemingly random barrel among the outlaws' barricade. For a moment, nothing happened. Then liquid began seeping from the barrel. clear liquid that carried the distinctive smell of coal oil. "Oh, God," Sarah heard Mills whisper. The barrel wasn't alone. Mason had spent the night positioning dozens of them, buried under debris or hidden in plain sight. Now the outlaws found themselves surrounded by enough flammable liquid to create an inferno. "Last chance," Mason called out. "Surrender or burn." Hawkins' response was a bullet that whined off the saloon roof near Mason's position. "Burn us, and you'll burn half the town with us." "Town can be rebuilt," Mason replied calmly. "You can't." The Whitworth spoke one final time. The bullet struck a fallen horseshoe, creating a spark that ignited the spilled oil. Within seconds, flames raced through the outlaws' position. Men screamed, abandoning cover, some already burning as they ran. "Jesus, Mary and Joseph," Tom Brady breathed, watching the carnage. Mason worked the Whitworth's action, calm as a man at target practice. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the best trap isn't the one that kills. It's the one that makes them choose between two different kinds of death." The fires burned through midday, smoke rising thick and black above Bitter Creek. What remained of Wilson's men and the Devil's Hand gang lay scattered through the streets, the dead, the dying, and the dozen who'd surrendered when the flames gave them no other choice. Mason moved among the fallen with mechanical precision, checking bodies, collecting weapons. His expression never changed, even when examining the charred remains of those caught in the inferno. Sarah followed him, trying to understand this man who'd brought both salvation and destruction to her town. "You knew," she said finally. "Knew exactly how they'd react, where they'd go, what they'd do, like you could see inside their minds." "Not minds." Mason kicked a dropped revolver aside. "Patterns. Men like this, they're predictable. Think violence makes them strong, really makes them blind, slaves to their own brutality." Sheriff Mills approached, his face streaked with smoke and gunpowder. "Found Hawkins. He's alive, but burned. Bad. Doc's treating him in the jail." "Town's casualties?" Mason asked. "4 dead, 6 wounded, none critical." "Could have been much worse." "Will be," Mason replied. "This isn't over." Sarah caught his arm. "What do you mean?" "Wilson's dead. Most of his men with him. The Devil's Hand is broken." "No." Mason's eyes scanned the horizon. "This was too easy. Wilson had more men than this. Better fighters, too, from what I heard in Shadow Creek." A cold weight settled in Sarah's stomach. "How many more?" "At least 20. His elite crews, men who've ridden with him longest." Mason checked the Whitworth's action. "They're out there, watching, waiting to see how we handled the first wave." "First wave?" Mills's voice cracked. "You're saying they sacrificed their own men, used them as a test?" "Smart tactics," Mason nodded. "Probe our defenses, see what we're capable of. Now they know about the explosives, the firing positions, the oil traps, won't fall for the same tricks twice." "We can't fight another battle," Sarah protested. "The men are exhausted. We've used most of our ammunition. The defenses are exposed. That's what they're counting on." Mason started walking toward the jail. "Time to have a talk with Hawkins, see what he knows about Wilson's plans." They found Hawkins handcuffed to a bed in the jail's back room. The doctor had treated his burns, but the gang leader's face was a mask of pain and hatred, his eyes fixed on Mason with pure venom. "Come to finish it?" Hawkins spat. "Do it clean at least. Owe me that much." "Rather talk." Mason pulled up a chair. "About Wilson's other men, the ones holding back." A smile twisted Hawkins' burned features. "Figured that out, did you? Doesn't matter. James Wilson might be dead, but his brother Marcus is twice the killer. He's got 20 hardened riders with him, men who've survived range wars and army patrols, real professionals." "When?" "Tonight. No warning, no mercy." Hawkins coughed, blood staining his lips. "They'll burn every building, kill every man, take their time with the women, make you watch it all before they finish you slow." Mason's expression didn't change, but something deadly flickered in his eyes. Like Shadow Creek. Shadow Creek. Hawkins laughed, then groaned at the pain it caused. That wasn't Wilson. That was Marcus. His masterpiece, he called it. Said he'd never seen a man break like you did, watching that woman. The Colt appeared, in Mason's hand, pressed against Hawkins' forehead, cutting off his words. Sarah had never seen such cold fury in a man's eyes. "John," she said softly, "we need him alive, need to know what's coming." For a long moment the only sound was Hawkins's ragged breathing. Then Mason slowly lowered the gun. "Marcus Wilson, he," said, his voice deadly quiet. "Where does he make camp?" "Won't matter," Hawkins wheezed. "Can't beat him. Not like this. Not with these farmers and—" Mason's hand shot out, grabbing Hawkins' burned throat. "Where?" "Cave system," Hawkins gasped. 3 miles north, natural fortress. You'll never get close. Got lookouts everywhere." Thank you." Mason released him. "That's all I needed." Outside the jail, Sarah grabbed Mason's arm. "You can't be thinking of attacking them. Not in their own stronghold. Not alone." "Not alone," Mills added. "We'll send riders for help. Army patrol station's 2 days away. Marshal's office in 2 days is too long." Mason cut him off. "They'll hit us tonight. Need to strike first. Need to—" He froze suddenly, eyes fixed on something in the distance. Sarah followed his gaze but saw nothing except the smoke-stained buildings and bullet-scarred streets. "John, what is it?" "Quiet," he commanded. "Listen." They stood in tense silence. Then Sarah heard it, the faint but clear sound of a church. Bell ringing, but Bitter Creek's church bell had been destroyed in the fighting. "That's coming from the north," Mills said. "From the direction of their camp," Mason finished. "Signal bell. They're moving early, starting their attack now." The words had barely left his mouth when the first shots rang out from the edge of town. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, but something was wrong. The shots weren't coming from outside town. They were coming from within. Mason spun, pulling Sarah behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood around them. "Impossible," Mills gasped. "They couldn't have gotten past our lookouts." "They didn't have to." Mason's voice was cold with realization. "They were already here." Movement caught Sarah's eye. Armed men emerging from buildings where townspeople should have been stationed. But these weren't Wilson's riders. These were faces she knew, people she'd served drinks to for years. "Henderson?" she whispered in disbelief, recognizing the general store owner. "Tucker from the bank, but they're part of it," Mason finished. "Whole time. Town wasn't just terrorized, it was infiltrated." Mills raised his rifle, then hesitated as more familiar faces appeared, weapons trained on them. "Half the business. Owners in town. They've been working with the gang all along." "Smart operation," Mason acknowledged, eyes scanning for escape routes. "Plant your people early. Let them become trusted members of the community. Then, when you need to take control, you have the enemy's positions mapped." A new voice called. "Out. Their resources identified. Their weaknesses known." Through the gunsmoke stepped Tom Brady, the old man's familiar shuffling gait replaced by a predator's stride. In his hands he held not his usual worn carbine, but a polished sharps rifle. "Tom," Sarah's voice broke, "not you too." "Tom Brady died in a ditch outside Austin 3 years ago," the old man replied, his accent changing, becoming harder, more educated. "I took his name, his stories, his life. Been playing the role ever since, helping the Devil's Hand identify targets, feeding them information." Mason's Colt remained steady, pointing at Brady's chest. "Marcus Wilson, I presume?" The old man smiled, and suddenly the weathered farmer's face became something else, something cruel and calculating. "Been waiting a long time to meet you properly, Ghost. Must say you lived up to your reputation. That business with the explosives, the oil traps, beautiful work." "You let your own men die," Sarah accused. "Wilson, Hawkins, all of them." "Acceptable." "Losses," Marcus shrugged. "Needed to see what we were dealing with, needed you to think you'd won. And now He gestured, and more armed men emerged, surrounding them completely. "Now we know all your tricks, all your preparations. No more surprises." Mason's eyes never left Marcus, but Sarah could see him counting opponents, measuring distances. At least 20 guns trained on them, maybe more. No cover within reach, except the water trough they crouched behind. "Shadow Creek," Mason said softly. "That was personal. You wanted me to know it was you." "Had to break the legend," Marcus replied. "The great ghost, the deadliest shot in Virginia, needed to show the world you were just a man, one who could be broken like any other." "Should have killed me." "No." Marcus's smile widened. "Death's too easy. Wanted you to live with it. Wanted you to carry that pain, knowing you couldn't protect her, knowing you were helpless." Mason's trigger finger tightened, but Sarah saw his eyes flick to the surrounding gunmen. Even he couldn't take them all before they cut him down. "Drop the gun, Ghost," Marcus commanded, "or we start killing townspeople, the real ones, not our plants. Children first, just like Shadow Creek." For a moment, Sarah thought Mason would try it anyway, would go down fighting against impossible odds. Then, with terrible slowness, he lowered the Colt. "Smart choice," Marcus nodded. "Tie them up. All of them. Want him to watch what happens. Next, want him to see history repeat itself." As rough hands seized them, disarming and binding them, Sarah caught Mason's eye, expected to see defeat there, or at least resignation. Instead, she saw something that chilled her more than Marcus's. Cruelty, a cold, calculating fury that promised violence to come. "One question," Mason said as they were shoved toward the jail. "How did you know I was coming, that I'd choose this town?" Marcus laughed. "Because we led you here, Ghost. Every step of your hunt, every clue you followed, every trail that led to Bitter Creek. We left them all. You thought you were the hunter." He leaned close, whispering, "You were the prey all along." The jail cells filled quickly with the loyal townspeople, those who had fought alongside Mason, who had dared to stand against the devil's hand. Sarah watched through the bars as Marcus Wilson's men secured the town, their practiced efficiency, showing how many times they'd done this before. Marcus himself stood before Mason's cell, savoring his victory. "You know what comes next. Same as Shadow Creek. Going to take this town apart piece by piece, make you watch every second of it." Mason sat on the cell's wooden bench, his back against the wall, eyes closed as if resting. His apparent calm seemed to irritate Marcus more than any resistance would have. "Nothing to say, Ghost? No threats? No begging?" Mason's eyes opened slowly. "Just wondering something about Shadow Creek. What's that? How much did it cost you? Burning your own town, killing your own men. Must have been expensive, setting up such an elaborate trap." Marcus's smile faltered slightly. Sarah saw uncertainty flicker across his face. "What are you talking about?" "Shadow Creek wasn't your victory," Mason said softly. "It was your sacrifice, your way of building the legend. The terrible Marcus Wilson, the man who broke the ghost, must have taken months of planning, years of positioning your people." "You're trying to play mind games," Marcus snapped, but there was something defensive in his tone now. "You were there. You saw what we did to that woman, to actors," Mason cut him off. "Hired guns paid to die convincingly, just like the townspeople you planted here in Bitter Creek. Everything staged, everything carefully planned to draw me in, to make me hunt you." Sarah's breath caught as understanding dawned. The confidence in Mason's voice wasn't the bravado of a defeated man. It was the certainty of someone who had known the truth all along. "You're lying," Marcus snarled. "You broke. I saw you break." "Saw what I wanted you to see. What I needed you to believe." Mason stood, moving to the cell bars. "Want to know the real question you should be asking?" "And what's that?" Mason's voice dropped to a whisper. "Why would I let you take my guns, but not search for lockpicks?" The cell door exploded outward, catching Marcus in the face. Mason moved like lightning, his hands somehow free, a hidden derringer appearing in his palm. 2 shots rang out before anyone could react. 2 of Marcus's closest men dropped, their own weapons half drawn. "Kill him!" Marcus screamed through, bloody lips scrambling backward. But his men hesitated, suddenly uncertain. In that moment's pause, more gunfire erupted, not from inside the jail, but from outside. "Remember those townspeople you thought you'd identified?" Mason asked conversationally, relieving a fallen man of his revolver. "The ones you thought were legitimate? Might want to ask yourself, if I could spot your plants, what makes you think you could spot mine?" The jail's front door burst open. Henderson from the general store rushed in, but not the Henderson who had helped capture them. This one moved like a trained killer, his shots dropping 3 of Marcus's men before they could turn. "Right on time, Captain." Mason nodded. "Sorry for the delay, sir," Henderson replied, his farmer's accent gone. "Had to wait for your signal." Marcus's face had gone pale. "Who? What are you?" "You wanted to trap a ghost," Mason said, checking the revolver's load. "Should have wondered why it seemed so easy, why a man with my experience would walk into such an obvious setup. Truth is, Marcus, Shadow Creek wasn't your operation. It was mine. First step in a plan to draw you out, to make you think you were the hunter." More gunfire outside, more shouts of confusion and pain as Marcus's carefully constructed trap collapsed around him. Through the window, Sarah saw Tucker from the bank, the real Tucker, organizing an assault on the infiltrators' positions with military precision. "You see," Mason continued, advancing on Marcus, "there's something you should know about ghosts. Sometimes when you think you're hunting them," he smiled, and it was the smile of the predator, not the prey. "They're really hunting you." Chaos erupted across Bitter Creek as Mason's true forces revealed themselves. Marcus's men found themselves caught between 2 enemies. The townspeople they'd imprisoned, now being freed and armed by Henderson's men, and Mason's hidden operatives emerging from their deep cover. 3 years of planning, Mason explained, keeping his gun trained on Marcus while Sarah and Mills were freed. Had to be patient. Had to let you think you were always 1 step ahead. "The whole hunt," Marcus said, comprehension dawning. Our trail I left for you was a trail I'd left first. Shadow Creek was the key. Knew you'd want something dramatic, something legendary, so we gave you the perfect story, the unbeatable ghost, broken by watching an innocent woman die." Sarah checked her shotgun, returned to her by Henderson. "The woman! Mary!" "Captain Mary Hawthorne," Henderson supplied. "One of our best operatives. She's currently leading the assault on their northern positions." Marcus lunged suddenly, desperate, but Mason's gun crashed against his temple, dropping him back to the floor. "Stay down. Not finished explaining how completely you've lost." Through the jail windows, they could see the battle shifting. Marcus's carefully positioned men, expecting to be the hunters, now found themselves hunted by opponents who knew their every position, every fallback point, every escape route. "Beautiful thing about letting the enemy infiltrate your town," Mason continued, "is they do all your reconnaissance for you. Your men mapped every building, every defensive position, thinking they were preparing for their own attack. Instead, they were showing us exactly where they'd be when the trap closed." "How many?" Marcus demanded. "How many of your people did you plant?" "Enough. Some real townspeople, too. Good folks who could be trusted. Had to have some legitimate targets for your spies to identify. Made the deception more convincing." Henderson appeared in the doorway. "Streets are secured, sir. Mary's team has their southern escape route blocked. Parker's men have the north. They're boxed in." "The riders you fought this morning," Sarah realized. "Wilson's men. That was stage 2. "Real enough," Mason replied. Marcus here had to believe his trap was working. Had to see his brother die, see his men fall. Made him commit his reserves, reveal his hidden assets. He smiled coldly. "Amazing how much people show you when they think they're winning." A new sound cut through the gunfire. A sharp, piercing whistle from the church tower. Henderson straightened. That's the signal. They're all in position. Mason nodded. Time for the last act. He hauled Marcus to his feet. Come on. Want you to see this. Want you to understand exactly how long you've been playing my game. They emerged into streets, transformed by combat. Bodies lay where they'd fallen, most wearing the dust-colored clothes of Marcus's infiltrators. The surviving attackers had been herded into the town square, surrounded by grim-faced men and women who moved with military precision. A woman approached their group, tall, red-haired, moving with deadly grace. Marcus's eyes widened in recognition. "Mary," he whispered, "but I watched you die, watched you burn." "Watched what I wanted you to see," she replied coldly. Amazing what a little theatrical blood and a good screaming performance can accomplish. Mason surveyed the square, where his forces had the remnants of Marcus's operation contained. "Count 17 prisoners," Mary reported. 8 dead, 4 trying to hide in the bank vault, but Parker's team has them surrounded. No escape routes. Left, town's real residents. Safe, had them moved to the fortified root cellars before we triggered the operation. No civilian casualties. Sarah watched in amazement as more of Mason's people emerged. Faces she'd known for months or years, all wearing their roles like comfortable clothes, all now moving with the unmistakable bearing of trained killers. "Who are you people?" she asked. "Really?" Mason's eyes never left Marcus. After the war, government needed deniable assets, people who could handle problems too delicate for official attention. We go where we're needed, set up long-term operations, remove threats that can't be touched through legal channels. Like us, Marcus spat. That's what this is about. Some kind of government-sanctioned... No, Mason cut him off. This is personal. Shadow Creek wasn't your first atrocity, just the first one we could use. 3 years watching you work. 3 years documenting every murder, every torture, every innocent life destroyed by your operations. Now it ends. He turned to Mary. Signal the final phase. Let's finish this. Mary raised a whistle to her lips, and a new chapter in the battle. For Bitter Creek began. Mary's whistle signal triggered a coordinated movement throughout Bitter Creek. Mason's operatives began herding their prisoners toward the livery stable, a solid stone building that had clearly been prepared in advance for this moment. 3 years, Marcus said, watching his operation collapse. You spent 3 years just to catch me? To catch all of you, Mason corrected. Every killer you trained, every sadist you recruited, every piece of the network you built, had to be thorough, had to be complete. A commotion from the bank drew their attention. Parker's team had smoked out the last holdouts, 4 hard-eyed men who'd been Marcus's personal killers. They fought even in surrender, requiring multiple guards to restrain them. Shouldn't have picked Bitter Creek, Mason continued. Town was too perfect, wasn't it? Just remote enough, just vulnerable enough. Good strategic location. We picked it because... Marcus stopped, understanding dawning. Because you led us here. All those raids we stopped you from investigating, all those trails you couldn't follow. You were herding us, right from the start. Henderson approached, his farmer's disguise discarded for well-worn military gear. Last group secured, sir. 32 total prisoners. Buildings rigged as planned. Mason nodded. Mary, show our friend here what we found in his camp. What he thought was so well hidden. Mary produced a leather ledger, its pages filled with precise handwriting. Marcus's face went pale. That's not... You couldn't have... Your record book, Mason said. Every operation, every murder, every corrupt official. You bribed, every territory you infiltrated. Names, dates, amounts, very thorough, very damning. Going to turn me over to the law? Marcus sneered. I've brought every judge from here to... No law. Mason cut him off. No trials, no chances for escape or bribes or rescue attempts. He turned to Mary. Get them all inside. Time to finish this. Sarah watched as the prisoners were moved into the livery stable. Something about the way Mason's people handled them, about the grim finality in their movements, made her skin crawl. "What are you planning?" she asked quietly. Mason checked his revolver with mechanical precision. Justice, the kind courts can't deliver, the kind that ensures they never hurt anyone again. Marcus began struggling against his captors, real fear showing for the first time. "Oh, you can't. This isn't what lawmen do." "Never claimed to be lawmen." Mason's voice was cold as a mountain stream. "Told you at the start, some men are rabid dogs, need to be put down." The last prisoners were secured inside the stable. Mason's people took up positions around the building, weapons ready. Sarah saw bundles of dynamite positioned at key points in the structure, enough to bring down the stone walls. "You're going to kill them all," she realized, "in cold blood." Nothing cold about it. Mason turned to her, and she saw the weight of 3 years of planning in his eyes. Every person in that building is a murderer, a torturer, someone who chose to inflict pain on innocent people. This isn't revenge, it's prevention. "John," Mary called from her position, "they're secured, all present and accounted for." Mason nodded, then addressed the gathered townspeople, the real ones, who had fought alongside them, unknowing. "What happens next? You don't need to watch, don't need to be part of it. We'll handle this." Sheriff Mills stepped forward, his face troubled. "This isn't legal, isn't right." "No," Mason agreed, "but it's necessary. Go home. Take care of your people. Tomorrow, Bitter Creek starts fresh. No more gangs, no more terror, just good people, living in peace." Sarah met his eyes one last time, saw both regret and iron determination there. This was the real Ghost, not just a legendary sharpshooter, but an instrument of harsh justice. A man who would carry the weight of necessary evils so others didn't have to. "Clear the area," Mason ordered. 5 minutes to final resolution. As the townspeople retreated, Mason turned to the stable, to the men inside who had thought themselves wolves among sheep, never realizing they were being gathered for slaughter. "Time to end this," he said softly. "Time to make sure no more Shadow Creeks ever happen." The sun was setting over Bitter Creek, painting the sky blood red, a fitting color for what was about to occur. From inside the livery stable came the sounds of desperate men realizing their fate. Marcus's voice rose above the others, a mixture of threats and pleas that fell on deaf ears. Mason's people had positioned themselves with military precision, covering every possible escape route. "Last chance, Ghost!" Marcus shouted through a window. "Think about what you're doing. Men like us, we can make a deal, work together." Mason checked the detonator connections with methodical care. "That's where you're wrong, Marcus. We're nothing alike. You kill for pleasure, for profit. I kill to stop men like you. You're going to murder 32 men in cold blood. How's that different from what I did?" "The difference?" Mason straightened, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "Every man in there chose to be a killer, chose to torture, to destroy lives. The people you murdered were innocent. These men," he shook his head, "these men are rabid dogs being put down." Mary appeared at his side, her rifle ready. "Charges are set, all personnel clear." "Wait!" A new voice called from inside, one of Marcus's lieutenants. "We can give you names, other gangs, corrupt officials, whole networks." "Already have them," Mason replied. "Your record book, remember? Very thorough. After tonight, a lot of powerful people are going to get unexpected visits. This isn't just about you anymore." Sarah watched from the shadow of the general store, unable to look away. She knew she should leave, should let Mason and his people handle this ugly business. But something kept her rooted, a need to witness, to understand. "John," she called softly, "does it have to end this way?" Mason turned, and for a moment his cold mask slipped. She saw the weight of what he was about to do, the burden he'd carry. "Yes, ma'am. Sometimes the only way to stop evil is to burn it out completely." A shot rang out from inside the stable. One of the prisoners had managed to conceal a derringer. The bullet whined past Mason's head, drawing an instant response from his people. Multiple rifles spoke as one, silencing the threat. "No more delays," Mason ordered. "Henderson, Mary, final checks. Make sure everyone's clear." But Marcus wasn't finished. His voice took on a new tone, not begging now, but mocking. "Tell me, Ghost, does Mary know about the real Shadow Creek? About what really happened to your wife?" Mason's hand tightened on the detonator, trying to sow doubt. "Marcus, turn my people against me. Amateur tactics. Amateur. Then why is your hand shaking? Why can't you look Mary in the eye?" Marcus's laugh carried through the window. "Tell her, Ghost. Tell her how you sold out your own wife to save your worthless hide. How you—" The Whitworths. Report cut through his words like thunder. Through the window, they heard Marcus cry out in pain. "Gut shot," Mason said calmly. "Won't kill him quick. Fitting, given his habits." "John," Mary stepped closer. "What's he talking about?" "Lies, manipulation, what men like him do when they're desperate." Mason's eyes met hers. "Trust you've known me long enough to know better." Mary studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Always. You know that." "Places, people," Mason called. "Out. Time to finish this." His operators took their final positions. The sun had set completely now, leaving Bitter Creek in twilight shadows. From inside the stable came the sounds of wounded men, of prayers and curses, of killers facing their own mortality. Mason's thumb caressed the detonator. "For Shadow Creek," he said softly. "For every town you terrorized, for every life you destroyed. This is where it ends." "Wait!" Marcus's voice was weaker now, pain-filled. "The truth about your wife. They deserve to know." "The truth." Mason's finger tightened on the trigger. "The truth is, some men can't be redeemed, can't be arrested, or reformed or reasoned with. Some men just need to be ended." The explosion that followed seemed to shake the very foundations of Bitter Creek. The livery stable collapsed inward, its stone walls becoming a tomb for the killers trapped inside. Mason watched without expression as flames began to lick through the rubble. "Check the perimeter," he ordered. "Make sure none of them somehow survived. Then prepare for Phase 2. "Phase 2?" Sarah asked, approaching despite the heat from the fires. "Dealing with their allies, their network. By morning, A.E., lot of respectable citizens across 3 territories are going to disappear. Judges, officials, business owners who helped them operate." His eyes reflected the flames. "This cancer gets burned out completely, no half measures." As his people moved to their tasks, Mason remained watching the fire. Sarah saw something change. In his expression, not satisfaction or triumph, but a deep, bone-weary relief. "Was it worth it?" she asked. 3 years of your life? All this death?" "Ask the next town they would have terrorized," he replied softly. "Ask the families who'll never know they're loved. Ones were avenged, but will sleep safer tonight. Evil spreads if you let it, Mom. Sometimes the only cure is fire." The flames rose higher, consuming the last traces of Marcus Wilson's operation. By morning, there would be nothing left but ashes, and silence, and the legend of how justice finally came to Bitter Creek. Dawn broke over a changed Bitter Creek. The fires had burned out, leaving only smoking ruins where the livery stable had stood. Mason's people worked efficiently through the night, removing all traces of their operation. By morning, they had vanished like ghosts, leaving only Mary and Henderson to handle final details. Sarah found Mason at the graves of the townspeople who died in the initial battle. He stood with his hat in his hands, paying silent respect to those whose deaths had been necessary for his trap to work. "Your people are leaving," she said softly. "Work's not done. Wilson's network was vast. Lots of corrupt men about to face justice." He replaced his hat. But the hardest part's finished, and Marcus's final words, about your wife, about the real Shadow Creek. Mason turned to face her. Man like that, dying, he'll say anything. Try anything. Truth doesn't matter to his kind. But Sarah saw something in his eyes, a flicker of old pain, quickly hidden. Some secrets, she realized, were better left buried with the dead. Town's going to need rebuilding, she said, changing the subject. That stable was our main business. Already handled. Henderson's staying on. His cover's good, and he's got money to invest. Legitimate money. He'll help Bitter Creek prosper. And Mary, a ghost of a smile touched Mason's lips. She's got other operations to handle. Other wrongs to right. It's what we do. And you, where does the ghost ride next? Mason checked his guns one last time. Professional habits that would never die. Best you don't know. Safer that way. But there's other Marcus Wilsons out there. Other gangs thinking they can prey on good people. Sarah stepped closer, laying a hand on his arm. Thank you, not just for saving us, but for showing us we could fight back, could stand up. You always could. Just needed someone to remind you. He mounted his horse, settling into the saddle with practiced ease. Town's yours now. Make it something good. Will we see you again? No, ma'am. Ghost only shows up where he's needed. Bitter Creek's in. Good hands now. He touched the brim of his hat in farewell, then turned his horse north. Sarah watched him ride away, his figure gradually fading into the morning mist like the legend he was. Sheriff Mills joined her, watching until Mason disappeared completely. Hard to believe it's over. All those months of fear ended in one night. Not over for him, Sarah replied. Never will be. Men like that, they carry their battles with them, keep fighting them over and over. Think he was telling the truth, about Shadow Creek, about everything. Sarah thought about the pain she'd seen hidden in Mason's eyes, about Marcus's final accusations. Think he told us what we needed to know. Rest isn't our business. The sun climbed higher, promising a new day for Bitter Creek. Already, townspeople were emerging, beginning the work of rebuilding. They moved differently now, straighter backs, higher heads, no longer afraid. Buy you a drink, Sheriff? Sarah asked. Think we could both use one? Reckon so, Mills agreed. To the ghost. No, Sarah shook her head. To Bitter Creek, and to good people finally remembering how to stand tall. Together they walked toward her saloon, leaving behind the ashes of the past and looking toward a future where shadows no longer held terror. Somewhere out there, the ghost rode on, seeking other battles, other wrongs to right. But his legend would live on in Bitter Creek, not just as the man who brought justice, but as the one who taught them to fight their own demons.